of that. And it's a group of business coaches that are coaching businesses so that they can grow and scale to provide jobs for those in the different countries in Africa.
Hello, viewers. Welcome to another beautiful episode of the Nana Yaa Yeboaa podcast. This is the show where we explore the intersection of personal growth and professional success. And I, as usual, I'm your host, Nana Yaa Yeboaa, with a very special guest. Mr. Jackson is an expert in executive coaching, leadership development, and personal growth. And he's here to share his wisdom on how we can achieve true success in both our personal and professional lives. So, Dr. Jackson, thank you, and welcome to the Nana Yaa Yeboaa podcast.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor and a pleasure to be a part of your podcast, and I look forward to the conversation.
Beautiful, beautiful. Before we dive into a lot of the nitty gritty, which we've kind of uh, circumvented a little bit, when it comes to say personal development and professional development, that is an area of that that is your area. I'd love to know what the pivotal moment was for you in your life, for you to get into that aspect.
Mm, that is a great question. I remember back in 2003, I was a business owner, and I woke up one morning and I looked in the mirror and I didn't like what I saw. And so I knew that in order for me to make transformation, to like what I see in the mirror and to become who I wanted to become, I was going to have to do a deep dive into who I am,
Hmm.
who I wanted to be to achieve what I wanted to achieve. And so I began a lot of reading around personal development. Had a mentor that I spoke with, Dr. Clarence Thomas, who's a minister, not the judge, Clarence Thomas,
Hmm. Yeah.
here. And, he says, you know what? You really need to narrow it down to about 7 words
Mm.
and come up with a mission statement. And so I came up with a mission statement in 7 words that kind of guides my life. And that is helping others improve their quality of life. That's
Helping
it.
others improve their quality of life.
Yes, absolutely. So if you engage with me in conversation, and if I can give you a little bit of knowledge or wisdom that helps you in your life, then guess what? I've met that mission or that vision. So
Mm.
it's very simple to meet it because it's about having that instant impact. And so as I read and I began to dig deeper into who I am and kind of draw the or paint the picture of who I wanted to be, leadership development was a part of it, which means that, personal development has to be a part of it. And so that's why I wrote the book Transformational Thinking,
Hmm.
because transformational thinking is about examining all of your mental models or your paradigms, why you see the world the way you see the world, and how you can go about changing all of that. Because we know that if we can change our mind, we can change our world, right? Because it's about, I like to say, I like to be able to see the same thing from new eyes. And the only way to do that is for me to make that change, both mentally and spiritually.
Oh wow, that is wonderful. I know. What about like in your own life? You know, when we were speaking, I was saying some people need tangibles. Like, what are some of the daily habits or routines that you have found essential for sustaining your personal growth and or staying focused?
That's a very interesting question because you mentioned the word routine. So,
Yes.
what I try to do is not to have a routine, which means I don't get into bad habits or I don't get into habits. And it
Hmm.
allows me to see things differently. For instance, I was talking to some executives and I asked them, I said, how often do you travel the same route to work every day? And just about all of them do. And I said, well, what are you missing by
Mm.
taking a different route every day? Try driving to the bank. If, at the time people drive to the bank, go to the bank a different way. Wake up a different time every morning. Take your shower at different time. Have your coffee at different times. And so it enables you to be able to observe yourself first and foremost. It enables you to observe all that's around you because now when you're doing it at different times, you're not going to see the same things. You're going to see different things. And so You want to be able to ensure that you're always incorporating differences in your life, because different doesn't mean deficient. It only
Mm,
means different, right? And so if we're going to be a collaborative, inclusive people,
mhm.
it gives you respect for what the differences are by you practicing seeing different things each and every day. So you don't get into that routine. Now, and I guess if you want to call it a routine, that is the routine. The routine is to be able to see different things from different perspectives on a day-to-day basis.
I think as you speaking, and I realize, so some will say get a routine, wake up at 5, do this, do that, and then go do this. But what you're also saying, and I really do understand that. For instance, if you're somebody who wakes up at that time and you go for a walk, don't always go on the path that you normally go. You can change directions. When you change directions, you see different things, you hear different things. And when you bring it back to neuroplasticity, your brains open up. So that's why it's like, oh, yeah. So
Absolutely.
in a sense, you can have routine, but also work within the routine, not to have a routine that takes you just one place without having alternative views of how things can be done. I don't know whether that makes sense. But
Yes, it does. Because life
yeah.
is about perspective, right? And it's also
Yes.
about curiosity, right? And
Yes.
so
Yes.
as you see different things, you begin to, wonder about things and ask different questions of yourself about
Hmm.
different things, which of course that in and of itself inspires different thought, different actions.
Hmm.
I like to use this formula of thought, actions, decisions, results. If you're going to change the results that you're going to have in your life, the only way to do that is to change the thought process, which is going to
Hmm.
produce different decisions, which
Hmm.
is going to produce different actions, which means you're going to produce a different result.
It's great. Um, so over the years, what is one piece of advice that, if ever you could have given your younger self in terms of
Mm.
personal development, what would it be? Because as the years have gone on, you've matured and you've gained wisdom, and you've seen, um, the unsuccessful things that has happened in your life and the lessons you've learned from it.
That's a great question, and I would say don't take the beaten path.
Mm,
Don't take the path of all the others that they've taken. When I was growing up, the the message was you get an education, you go get a good job, you know. But as we look at the environment, especially corporate America or corporations around the world, and we see the different dynamics that are changing, I think it's really about entrepreneurship. It's about creating something versus going in and working 25, 30 years for an organization. So I would say the beaten path was that process of the education and then going to look for the job. It should have been the education and creating your own path through entrepreneurship. I would say the message would be for me to do it at a younger age. And I probably did it. I think the first time I did it, because now I've been in and out of corporations, so I'm following that advice. Um,
You're following your
Probably
own advice
I'm
now.
following my own advice. I've been at the consulting business for a while, and prior to that, I had another
Mhm,
business, and when I did the PhD, I was actually working for myself, and then I went back into corporate, and I came out
mhm,
only because curiosity, being innovative, following my own advice of
mhm,
building your own, building something that you'd be proud of, building something where you can really help others. And that's why the consulting and the coaching, because that consulting and coaching is truly about personal development, helping
mhm,
executives and others, managers
mhm,
develop themselves so that they can perform at their highest level, optimal levels. And so, that whole formula of the education to job, it's nothing is wrong with it, but for me, it probably would have been better sooner had I
mhm,
come out of corporate America and followed the whole entrepreneurial roadmap, which is a difficult roadmap. but
It
it's
is.
one where there's a lot of ingenuity in it. There's a lot of curiosity. There's a lot of innovativeness. You know,
Mhm.
uh, and there's a lot of responsibility, and that accountability and responsibility rests solely with you, the producer of, because either you're putting it on the table or you're not, right?
Mm.
And so, and I would prefer to be there and doing that versus in someone else's environment where they can limit
Mhm.
uh, possibly how I ascend up the ladder or what my compensation would be.
That is great. I think for some of us, we're still caught in the emotions where we go.
Hmm.
I think now I have a sense of direction where I'm going. But when I started, I really didn't. I, I was doing this for because I couldn't do journalism. So this was an out. But the more
Mm.
I do it, the more I realized that also there was a yearning for knowledge that I didn't have.
Hmm.
So having these conversations with you, for instance,
Hmm.
seeing a different perspective, seeing that there's a possibility. And if I'm looking and seeing that possibility, that means somebody else.
Hmm.
So I realize I'm the medium
Yes, yes.
for this to channel through, because even as you are in the US and come across people, it's a different audience that is listening, and it's a different audience that may listen also when it comes to the Nana Yaa Yeboaa podcast. So thank you so much for doing what you do.
You're
and
welcome.
and what you say, and also what I'm gathering from it, is that it's never too late when.
It is never too late. One of the questions I ask people, especially black men
Mm-hmm,
around my age, I say, when is the last time you dreamed?
mm-hmm. Oh.
When is the last time you've dreamed? Because often people get at a certain age and they no longer have dreams of what they would like to accomplish. They just become super comfortable, right? And comfort has always been the enemy, right? And so we hear the word retirement. And so
Yes.
that means you just want to sit back and receive, I guess, your Social Security and your 401k or your investments from, if you have that,
Mhm.
from when you work. But you no longer hear about a dream of what they like, as if they stopped dreaming. And we never should stop dreaming, right? And so there's an acronym that I like to use, and I did a CD set and a book called Personal Mastery back in
Personal
2000
mastery.
and back in 2013. And the acronym is time, and I would always say it's your time, regardless of what time it is. It's your
It's your
time,
time.
and
Hmm.
time is for transform, inspire, motivate, and empower. And so first, we have to transform ourselves. We have to inspire ourselves. We have to
Hmm.
motivate ourselves. And we have to empower ourselves. And you and I talked about empowerment earlier, right?
Yes.
It begins with self empowerment. But people stop dreaming, right? And so, you know, probably the first of the year, I don't do New Year's resolutions. But what I do is I'm on this for the last 4 years. I'm on this journey of what I call a quantum leap. And so I
Hmm.
write down certain goals. And I understand with quantum leaps, in quantum leaps, it doesn't always go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. In quantum leaps, it goes 1, 5, 10.
Mm.
And often what happens is what we call uh, the universe, unseen hand, whatever you want to call it. There's
Hmm.
something that comes together that helps you
Hmm.
achieve. Because
Hmm.
you don't, oftentimes with the quantum leap, you don't know the how. You know the what. You know what I'd
Yes.
like to be achieve, but I don't know the how.
Hmm.
And I'm sure you've had experiences you knew the what, you didn't know how you were going to do it, and all of a sudden it happens.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so that's that whole quantum leap. And so I've written down certain goals for the quantum leap. And so uh, I go through the affirmation around the
Hmm.
quantum leap is, I know what I want, I know where I'm going, and I know why I'm going in that direction, and
Hmm.
I let that lead me.
Hmm.
And the how takes care of itself. I take care of the what, and the how takes care of itself.
I have come to, most especially starting this podcast last year, this year. I had come to the understanding that I can reach out to 1,000 people, even if I get 2 people, 3 people, I'm okay. Three quality that we can have in-depth conversations. And in the beginning, I used to take the no's personal. Now I don't take any no personal, because I realize that a no means that the energy may not be the right energy, the voice may not be the right voice at this particular point in time or on this platform. So that is perfectly fine. And I made it an intention to grow, and I didn't term it as a quantum leap, but as you speak, and it's like, oh, maybe I might have done that, because I think it was more of a moonshot of a ridiculous
Absolutely.
number. I,
Absolutely.
and to be frank, I had no idea, but I said, okay, every day counts when I'm making a decision for, say, this podcast for my audience, and that I am going to go through and see the quality individuals that I believe speak the language that people like myself and others will benefit from, and connect with
Yes.
them. And so far, it's been so beautiful. I haven't had any no's, and we're sailing through. But
Awesome.
let's come back to, when you're doing your work, you are an executive coach, which means you're dealing with the big wigs, even though they're also humans. What are some of the common challenges that they face that you normally address?
That's a great question, because we think because they're big wigs that they have challenges that are different from
Yes.
other the challenges that we would call the normal man would have. But
Mm-hmm.
the fact is they have the same challenges that we all have every day. How to communicate better,
Mm-mm.
how to lead better, not only others, but how to lead themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Self-awareness, that's the biggest piece, having self-awareness of who you are, because having self-awareness of who you are actually helps you become more self-aware around others and how you treat others. And oftentimes we hear people say, I'm going to treat someone else like I want to be treated. And I tell them, no, you treat others as they want to be treated, because they may not want to be treated the way you want to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm.
true. That's true self-awareness. Knowing that I need to treat someone like they want to be treated. Now, we don't always do that because we're human and we're all perfectly flawed. I like to use that phrase. We're all perfectly flawed.
Perfectly
So
flawed.
we all have opportunities to improve in everything that we do. So they have the same. I've worked with some executives in which you could see in their children, you could see their attitudes in their children, and you had to use the children to show them that this is an area that you need to work on, because look at your son, look at how what he's doing and how he's treating other people, and all of a sudden it resonates with them, and they said, you know what, I don't want my son to be like me, I want him to be different, so I need to accept this coaching. I need to be able to delegate, better. I need to be more secure. Oftentimes you run into what we call imposter syndrome, where you have these
Mm-hmm.
guys in the leadership, but they don't see themselves as others see them. There's a lot of low self-esteem in leaders. I remember talking to one leader, and I was asking him, why is it that you like to avoid tough conversations? And once I got into the questioning with him, I found out that he didn't want to have tough conversations because, as the oldest child growing up, it was his job to keep harmony amongst he and him and his siblings. So that
Mm.
meant that there was no arguing. And so, which means that as an executive now, I need to have a tough conversation with my organization or with one of my direct reports.
Mm-hmm.
I avoid that,
Mm.
which means that my culture of my organization is going to be hugely impacted because we can't have those tough conversations. People who directly report to me, I can't have those conversations with them either, which means my culture is going to dictate itself versus me as a leader kind of molding the culture of the organization. And that's going to be a culture of an organization that can't make tough decisions because it can't have the tough conversations. So how I helped them was, let's remove the connotation of good and bad from the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a conversation that has to be had. You're thinking of it as a bad, tough conflict. You're thinking all the negative terms because all the negative connotations associated with it. And let's just put it in the positive. Let's remove any meaning. It's just a conversation. It's you and I talking right now, and it has to happen. And so he began to work better. But communication, the ability to interact with people, the ability to listen, because sometimes they think that, hey, I'm the leader, so my job is to provide the answers. In today's society, in today's workplace, it is not the responsibility of the leader to have all of the answers. It is the responsibility of the leader to ask the probing questions of their employees or their direct report to get them to think of what the right answers are.
You know why I was smiling so much? I've been getting a lot of requests for personal development and whatnot, and I actually have a webinar I'm working on in March for developing soft skills for personal and professional growth. So that's why I'm smiling so much. For me myself, I also needed to find who I am. Number one, being an African woman, a black woman, so-called black woman. I didn't know I was black till I came to North America. Yes, I needed to know who I was, uh, and what kind of person, and having experiences with bad leaders or people who were in leadership positions who need not be leaders, and trying to figure out and unpack all these things led me here. So that led me to me finding out what my value system is, or what my values are as a human being, and how it directs me and molds me on this path. And then, if as in leadership, what kind of leader I am, etc., etc. So that's why I am smiling, because I had to go through all these, and it took me years. It wasn't overnight. It took me years. So thank you for what you're doing, and I feel like I need to get you to teach this in the webinar.
I would be more than happy to teach it in a webinar because that's actually, what I do. I actually was working with a client last week,
Hmm.
and it was the science of leadership. That was
Mm,
the title. And I use
yeah.
science as an acronym. So
Hmm.
the acronym S stands for strategy,
Mm,
C stands for communication, the I is for initiative,
hmm.
the first E is for engagement, the N is for negotiation, the second C is for culture, and at the end of the day, the last E stands for execute. You have to be
To
able to execute,
execute. Yeah.
right? And so I can use other C words in there, but the science of it. Now, I can also add the art and science of leadership. And the
Hmm.
art would be acknowledgement or accountability, responsibility, and technicality or teaching. So I can go with the art and science of leadership, and I can teach all that because all of that content I already have developed. Um,
Yes.
yes, and so as you call soft skills are
Mm,
really the hard skills because I can teach you the technical aspects of your job, but I can't teach you the ability to get along with other human beings.
hmm.
That's a difficult thing because all our personalities are different.
Yes.
And so as
Yes.
human beings begin to interact with each other and the different emotions that we go through, and that's why I say on my book, Co-Creation Leadership, it's about the greater good of the organization, which means
Hmm.
I'm going to remove any emotions that I have. I'm going to do what's best for the organization, not necessarily what's best for me.
Mm, mm. Oh, my goodness.
And that book, Co-Creation Leadership, is
Cool.
actually an actionable guide. So when you open it,
Okay.
you're going to read, but it has steps in it from 1 to 50.
So where do we find? I need a copy of that book. All copies.
The co-creation leadership, all of my books can be found on Amazon.
Amazon. Okay.
All of them. There's transformational thinking, then there's
Mm-hmm.
co-creation leadership, but there are also two ebooks that are on Amazon that I've written called Finding the Right Note, and that's a combination of how to use music in leadership. Meaning, when you think about the conductor of an orchestra,
Mm-hmm.
you have an orchestra playing a score 100%. How did they develop that culture? How is
Mm-hmm.
it that every musician, whether you're playing the drum, the oboe, the saxophone, the flute, they're all in harmony. They all understand their role, even though you have first seat, second seat, third seat, fourth seat.
Mm-hmm.
Each one of them understand their role, and they know that the role and the mission is to be 100% so that the audience understands their music and enjoys themselves. So how do we take that same culture and get it into an organization where everyone is supposed to understand their role because they have roles and responsibilities that they do every day? But the same harmony that you hear in an orchestra, you don't see in an organization. And then the other one is, how do leaders keep the music playing? That's more of the same kind of concept. Tell you a quick story. I was listening to Jamie Foxx talk about his role as Ray Charles.
Mm-hmm.
And he said when he went in to kind of, and he met Ray Charles the first time, they didn't know that he played the keyboard too, and he's a classically trained pianist. So Ray Charles sits down to play, and Jamie is playing, and he's kind of following him because he's not quite sure the songs that Ray's playing. And Jamie said in one of the songs he missed a note, and Ray stopped playing, and he looked at him and said, "Why did you do that? Why did you do that?" He said, "Well, Ray, I was just trying to play along with you." He said, "But you never hit the wrong note." He said, "Life is about always finding the time to hit the right note."
Mm.
And so that inspired me to write the ebook, Finding the Right Note and How Do Leaders Keep the Music Playing. And it's all about leadership and management using the construct of music and orchestra.
So, this is one thing that I admire about you when I read your articles. I was reading the one you just put up maybe today, and it's the way you look at, say, nature
Mhm,
and us.
mhm,
It's so beautiful that many of the things that we don't think about, we ignore in nature. Nature actually teaches us
mhm,
how to, but we often don't pay attention to it.
mhm.
I don't know how you do it, but it's a beautiful read. And I know I wrote here that you wrote that nature exemplifies the power of community in your recent article. And it's like,
Mhm.
wow, this is so beautifully written.
Thank you. Thank you.
I-
I think part of our challenge is,
Mhm.
as human beings, we think we're separate from nature, and we're not. We're just another animal in nature. And if we see ourselves that way, and we see ourselves as a part of nature, then it enables us to slow down just a little and observe the connection between a blade of grass and us, the connection between the bees and the birds and us.
Mhm.
If we look at the ants and how they operate and what they do,
Mhm.
it's amazing. Nature is the greatest teacher that was given to us, but especially in the West, where we see human beings as objects,
Mhm.
we don't pay attention to nature. So, as in my travels and in my studies of the PhD, I began to understand systems thinking. And
Mhm.
then I found that systems thinking was created by a botanist, Ludwig van Bertalanffy, and he was using the plants to understand systems and how they worked and the whole natural way of being. And then when you look at Eastern philosophy, it is a more
Mhm.
holistic way of being than Western philosophy.
Philosophy. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And so it considers the whole versus the West looking at it, breaking it down
Individual.
analytically and individually, right? And not looking at the whole human, the whole person. Let me just take a look at, this about you and this about, and they do that in medicine. You have high blood pressure, so I'm going to give you this for this, but I'm going to have a negative impact here because I'm not considering the whole. And so years ago, that's what took me there.
I'm going to make you laugh. Every time I see Donald Trump, I just look at him as Kweku Anansi, making the mistakes, but not
Yeah,
having the sense to course correct. So,
that's right. Yeah.
so everybody's like,
He is the
I,
epitome of Western society.
society. Yes, yes. Uh, It's about me, 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 and everybody else. I don't care. And when I looked at that and everybody else following, I also start laughing because it's like the accounts will say, "Tikro inkwe ejina." One head does not counsel alone, or the other proverb that says that um um oh, I'm struggling with the English
That's okay. That's
interpretation,
okay.
but
That's okay.
we'll leave that. What I'm trying to say is that Benkum, the left needs the right as much as the right needs the left.
Yes,
Benkum jari nifa na nifa so jari benkum. Aha. And the isolation of America is like having a broom and just taking one and not coming together. So, say between Canada and Mexico, saying, "This is how I'm going to treat you." But Canada and Mexico, together with the United States, together is stronger. Apart, we fall. So,
absolutely.
I'm looking at all these Kwekwanansi tactics that often does not work. And then if only he could course correct, but he will be like Anansi at the pot of wisdom, and then all the knowledge will fall.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
It's amazing. You said some things there that really resonated with me and caught my attention, right? And
Hmm.
so when I think about when I'm writing articles and how I'm writing articles and why I'm writing articles, it's
Yes.
because of what you just did. You said
Hmm.
something that resonated with me that I hadn't heard before. So then I'll go write an article about it. And so when I wrote about Anansi, I was doing some reading, and of course I knew who Anansi was. I already knew that.
Hmm.
But when I read that, I said, you know what? It would be a good article to take it from that perspective.
Yes.
And that comes from the routine of having no routine, but the routine of pure observation and differences. Noticing everything around me, hearing everything around me, and deciding, you know what? I can take that and write an article.
Hmm.
And so it's a part of the routine that I don't have the routine that enables that kind of innovativeness or creativity to happen.
Yes. 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 I think it's also refreshing in the sense that for those of us rooted in culture tradition, and
Mhm.
it helps us break that, as you say, routine of seeing things the way they are supposed to be, and thinking about outside the box, that it's not just the small box, but there's a larger box that you can get out of this small box and utilize the narratives, the stories that our ancestors has, transferred onto us for leadership. Because like when we were speaking earlier, the
Hmm.
American gods, yeah,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
American gods, and the Anansi character, the trickster, I disagree with that. But the message that it was carrying was a lot of motivation, of inspiration, and transforming your lives and encouraging the people to understand that you have ownership of your life. You can do X, Y, and Z. Either way, you are going to die, but you determine the terms of how and where you are going to die, either in
Absolutely.
bondage or free yourself and free your soul to return to the motherland.
A lot of words that are catching my attention because, of course, I know who the
Yeah.
Igbos are. I know who the
Yes.
Limba. I know who the Limba people are, right?
Hmm.
And so, we like to relate it to what they would call the Jews or truly the Israelites, right?
The Israelites. Yes.
The
Yes.
Israel, they call them the
Yes.
Jews. We know who call them the Jews, but we know that they're the Israelites, right? And
Hmm.
so, who came out of Kemet.
Yes.
Yes. So I know who they are historically. So when you say the Igbo, I was like, wow.
Yes. 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 So there's a lot. As I wrote some time ago, the past has much. Titi wobika, titi wobichre. The
Mm,
past has a lot to say. The past has a lot to teach.
mhm.
Titi
And
will be
that's
ka, titi will be chere.
and this is what they know in the United States. That's why they're trying to prevent the teaching of our history in this country in the schools because they know the past has a lot to say and the past has a lot
There's a
to
lot to
teach.
teach.
And they don't
Yes.
want that past to be taught and the people to know it because the truth will come out.
Yes. Yes. And as my people will say, Sankofa Yenti, the knowledge of the past, the customs and the traditions root us.
Hmm.
Yes.
Hmm.
And people who don't know their history wouldn't know themselves. In this technological age, the best ever is that you can always research to find. And I find that as persons of color, as black people, if you know exactly who you are, where you come from, your culture, your language, then in leadership, you know exactly where you're taking, what footsteps you are taking, and that nobody can sway you as
Hmm.
to, hey, this person. I was listening to this what is his name? Forowe, Prince Forowe, or something like that. Talk about being in a room full of white people and when the introductions were going on, they pointed to him, "Hey, black man, it's your turn." And knowing who he was, he gave his background history as being from Edo State in Nigeria, the Great
Hmm.
Benin Kingdom, and
Hmm.
he is a prince.
Hmm.
Which they asked, "Oh, where is that?" It's like Google it. But knowing that gave him that power of, I am this person, not by your definition, by my definition. These are my people. So that is also great. I think we kind of veered off topic, but it's all good. It's all good.
You know, you discovered my article on Anansi,
Yes.
which talked about shared knowledge and wisdom.
Yes.
And you made the contact, and I agreed to come on to the show.
That
And
is true.
so I've heard a lot of wisdom in our conversation. We've shared a lot of knowledge. So we're not like Anansi because Anansi was trying to hoard. He was trying to hoard it, right? And
He
his
was
son,
trying to hoard it
he's
in
trying to
Tikuma.
hoard. Yeah, that's right. Until his son told him, "Hey, here's a different way of doing things." And because of that, communities can be
Hmm.
created because of shared knowledge, because of wisdom. Others can learn, and you can pass it on. And I think when those who see this podcast will understand that a Nazi was what brought all this together, and the topic of
Yes.
shared knowledge and the topic of
Yes.
wisdom, they'll
Yes.
glean a lot of wisdom and shared knowledge
Yes.
out of this conversation.
Yes. Rooted in Anansi.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah, so let's see about challenges because my journey to North America was full of challenges,
Mm,
and the recent immigrants also going through the challenges here, and then we have, as I'll say, our brothers and sisters in the diaspora who had gone through challenges over 400 years ago and has fought tremendously, sweat, blood, and everything, and life to for us to come and enjoy, quote
mhm,
unquote, enjoy this period from the civil rights movement that also transformed the continent of Africa by changing the mindset of the African leaders.
mhm.
And presently, as a Ghanaian, I would say I'm very happy with the year of the return and beyond the return. Our brothers and sisters coming home,
Yeah,
yes, to root themselves and become familiar with the culture of, of
yeah.
the motherland. So coming back to you in the work you're doing and overcoming challenges. So, what are some of the things that you find in people that both for the professional and personal journeys, some of the challenges that get them stuck in their careers or in their lives and where they need to start making changes?
Yeah. That's a great question. Oftentimes, people get stuck in at some point in time saying this is the way that I've always done it,
Mm,
and so they're not open to change one way or the other, or gaining new skills, or learning new knowledge. So this is the way that I've always done it. Change we know is the only thing that is constant. And so every morning we wake up, there's something different about us, our bodies, who we are. And if you understand that, then you know that you can do nothing but embrace change, right? And I also make the distinction between change and transformation because we use the words interchangeably. Let me give you an example of what change is. So I have a glass, I put it on the table, I pour water into it. It's a liquid state. I take that glass and I put it in the freezer and it freezes so it becomes at a frozen state.
Mhm.
I take that glass out of the freezer, I sit it back on the counter and it thaws out. That's change because now that water has gone from water to ice back to
To
water.
water. Okay.
Change can be reversed.
Mm.
Transformation cannot. Transformation, as you've seen in nature, you've seen the caterpillar go from the caterpillar to the butterfly. The butterfly never becomes a caterpillar again. It's on the journey of the butterfly. If when the caterpillar is a caterpillar and it goes through what I call the messy middle and goes into its cocoon, if you interrupt the maturation of that cocoon, the caterpillar will never become the butterfly. But if you let it be, if you just stew in the messy middle, and when it comes out as a butterfly, that butterfly is not an improved caterpillar. It is a totally different being. It is a totally different animal, insect, if you will. It's not the same. So when we talk about going through transformation, we're looking at a continuous journey. We're looking at making somewhat of a shift where we're never the same again. Now, change happens within transformation, but transformation in and of itself is totally different because I can't, as I gave you the example of the water and the ice and going to water,
Mhm.
that's too often that's where we have been as a people. We've
Mm.
talked about change. And so when we find ourselves in the very same situation or predicament that we've been in before, it's because we practice change, but not transformation.
Mm.
Transformation is if you know that the system is not a system that is conducive to who you are and who your people are, then you create a new system. You don't continue to try to flourish in a system that has not enabled you to flourish. If there are governments on the continent of Africa who continue to do the same thing over and over again and produce the same result, then they're going through change by having different leaders. I can tell
Yes.
you that uh, Ibrahim Traore is
Is that
practicing transformation. He's created a whole new system in Burkina Faso that where they've taken over their own. They're creating their own and not depending on anyone on the outside. They've taken their own gold back. They're growing their own food. And every week you turn around, there's a new coup that someone is trying to have against Burkina Faso because not only has he transformed Burkina Faso, but he's transformed France because now France doesn't have access to all the minerals that they had access to before. Mali is doing the same thing. Niger is doing the same thing. Um, and other countries, and Chad. And so now you see what Ghana says we're going to close all US bases on the continent or in our country. That's following suit for what Ibrahim Traore is doing. So transformation is happening across the continent. Now, those leaders who've been conditioned by Western society, they either have to transform how they think and see the world, or
Mhm.
there has to be new leaders who are become president of those countries who understand what transformation actually is. And I know that's a difficult thing. I know it's a difficult thing because they get so used to the riches and the wealth and all the perks and the mindset because they're so conditioned to think like the West that they have to understand that if it's not for the continent of Africa, no other country could survive, given all that Africa provides for the country. No cell phones, no laptops, no technology can happen without coltan that comes out of the Congo. Lithium batteries, it doesn't happen without Africa. Diamonds, all the oil. I remember the time when Nigeria was the head of OPEC, the oil producing and exporting countries. They did away with that, and because They didn't want all of that wealth to happen on that continent because at some point in time, that wealth is going to create liberation.
Yes. When you talk about Africa, sorry, our motherland, I see so much that can be done, and the huge impact of colonization and Western democracy on our, systems. That I say, Nigeria is the is known in the world as one of the most corrupt areas. But when you ask who showed the path to, we need to be asking these questions, because when you dig deep down, you find the answers of where many of these corrupt leaders, their monies are hidden. Who gave them the money, who took the money, who is sitting on the money, and who is enjoying the money, and who is paying for these atrocities. For me, it's women and children that always suffer at the hands of some of these things. So we need to ask ourselves the critical questions and ask us, what kind of leaders do we, how do we call it, are we looking for? But not only what kind of leaders, the leadership begins with us, personal self leadership. So for our children to get into leadership positions, that means we need to get to them at kindergarten, at high school, at senior secondary school, at university, inculcating the essence of self leadership, self awareness, grounded in culture. Have a look at the West, at the world, the impact of stories on who we are, and all the nitty gritty of it, so that when they come out and become leaders, they don't just become puppeteers.
Absolutely. It's amazing what you said. We have to ask ourselves the critical questions. And one question came to mind is a question that Malcolm X asked us many years ago. Who taught you? Who taught you to hate yourself?
Who taught you
So
to
who?
hate yourself?
Yeah. So the question is, who taught you to be corrupt? Because that's something that was learned. That's not something
Yes.
that's innate to the leaders of Africa. They
Yes.
learned that. They observed. They looked across somewhere and they saw things happening, and they thought they could do the same things. So that's a behavior that is learned, and they learned it from somewhere. And I'm willing to say that a lot of that corruptness came from Western society. They looked at
Yes.
Western leaders. They looked at what happened with the Berlin Conference. How more corrupt can you get than to go and take a
A whole
place where you don't live,
continent.
yes, and divide it up amongst people, and say that you have rulership over these groups of people in these different countries. That's extremely corrupt to do that to another human
I,
being.
I'm going to share this with you. In the news, I was looking at this news, and it was saying that the British are loaning Ghana the gold.
I saw that.
The, yes, and I really had to sanction my mouth, in a sense that I wanted to do a video on that. How can you come and steal and claim ownership and say, I'm loaning to you what is ancestrally belongs to you? It doesn't make one bit of sense to me. But that calls for who is telling the story.
Yes,
A thief, theft is theft. It
yes.
was stolen. You cannot loan to me what you've stolen to me for me. You return what you have stolen from me. And if you want it, I loan it to you, not the other way around. So that begs the question, who negotiated this nonsense?
you know,
Ayankwasi Asem, it is nonsense.
it is nonsense. But it's consistent because when you understand that their their standard is the double standard. Their standard is the double standard. And when I say that, I mean this. There's no room for the truth in what they do. The truth, if exposed, will show you who they're not,
Yes.
because a picture has been painted about who they are, and they're not indigenous to any place on earth. And not being indigenous to any place on earth means that you always have to distort the truth. I heard someone say, if you want to learn about Egypt, don't visit Egypt, go to the British Museum, because they've stolen all the artifacts from Egypt and they have them there. If you really want to learn the truth of Egypt or Kemet, you go to the London, the museums, the British museums in London. So that tells you who they are, to say that I'm going to loan back to you what's yours, knowing that they stole it. And they will admit that. But if they admit what the truth actually is, then they admit that everything about their culture has been taken from other cultures. They have nothing of their own. And
I
and that's not anything they want to admit.
I was looking at the Chanel symbol and I said, no, this is a Dinkra symbol, wisdom not.
Yes, yes, yes. Yves Saint Laurent, if you look at their logo, it was stolen from Africa. If you look at Starbucks, the Starbucks logo, Mami Wata. And so there have been many logos stolen by American companies or companies abroad, in which all of that is knowledge and symbols that come straight from the continent of Africa.
When this brings me to another conversation that with African artifacts. There was a conversation that said the West is keeping it safe because we don't keep it safe. Now, if you see that there's a carving in front of a home, or that all these carvings that are used because it is everyday use, the carving is everyday use by this family, and it will disintegrate. That is fine. Another one will be made. So I think the living that we live in connection and in contact always with nature is they don't get it.
Right, right.
Adinkra symbols were not meant to be put away. When you wear the cloth with Adinkra symbols, Jinyame or Adinkra Hene or Anansi Tintai or whatnot, it is speaking a language to you.
Yes,
If we wear kente, depending on the colors or the design, it's speaking to you.
yes, yes. That's interesting, because I told you I had a good friend of mine from Senegal. We went to college together,
Yes.
graduated together, being good friends, ever since. He stayed 6 months here, 6 months there. But the last time he came back, he told me he was going to bring me an outfit from, I'm gonna call it outfit for lack of a better description, because I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what to call it, from Senegal. The
Mm-hmm.
pants and I guess the kind of dashiki, if you will, it'd be
Yes.
matching, and it had a symbol on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to and I presented at a Kwanzaa event,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the ladies took a picture of it, and then
Mm-hmm.
she sent it back to me to tell me what the meaning was. I don't quite remember the meaning right now, but what I will do is contact you and let you know what it meant. And
Mm-hmm.
it was along the lines of the symbols, the Dinka symbols, which I've saved on my laptop, and so I can go and I can take a look at them. But she gave me the actual meaning of what it meant, and I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know until that time, because it's a beautifully designed um, outfit for men, right, from
Mm-hmm.
Senegal. And he was like, he calls me TJ, TJ, TJ. I'm gonna bring this back. So he brought it back to me, and I wore it
Yes.
for yeah, and it's beautiful. So I'm gonna go take a look at that meaning again.
Yes. So all these symbols have meaning that are applicable to life. And that was one of the conversations that I am having, that sometimes when an African speaks, you may not understand what he's speaking because there's a proverb that says that "Obanyansafo yebune be yenkanasem." A word to the wise is enough. Or a wise
Mm,
person is spoken to in proverbs, not in simple language, which
mm,
means you use your higher reasoning to decipher it. So if you don't understand, it will just go over you, which means you are not using your God given, you know. That is why Africans have so many proverbs interwoven into our language, into our lives, and everything else. And these Adinkra symbols are both symbolic, but they are also proverbs with deeper meanings, which are applicable to life. And when you look at the Adinkra symbol and uncertain time, it looks at the resourcefulness, the complexities, and resourcefulness in life. So it's resourceful, it's complex, and what does the AE Anansi web that what does the spider uses its web
yes, yes,
to
yes,
catch?
That's right.
to
That's right.
feed itself.
Absolutely.
But when you look at that too, and you comes to the story of Kente, that is where we got the idea of weaving. But that's a different story that I can't tell.
Mm.
Yes.
I thought of something, and you can tell me what you think about this. And I've heard someone say it before. You can't speak butterfly language to a caterpillar. You can't speak butterfly language to a caterpillar.
So from what I understand is that then the caterpillar has outgrown the caterpillar. Separate entities. Language transmission is not until that person is, as we say, transforming to, then when you are given that information, it stays with them to transform them into that butterfly. But aside from that, you can tell it 20,000 times until that transformation is happening, it is not going to happen.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think when it comes to self leadership and leadership in Africa, many of us get stuck in the caterpillar stage, and we need to work on transformation into that butterfly stage so that this conversation we having, we can bring it out with us and blossom and become beautiful.
And what we have to understand too is this: every caterpillar doesn't want to become a butterfly.
If you die in your cocoon, stay in your cocoon. But irrespective of that, even, well, it's come from moth, that kind of silk. Everybody has a role to play. So even if that butterfly, that cocoon does not become a butterfly, those that will become, hopefully this conversation is sown on those fertile soils so that when they come out, they have the equipment that they need. If they don't, then that means they were not meant to.
That's right. That's right. And it doesn't make it a bad thing, right? Because as you
Yes.
said, everyone has a role. Every voice is important. Every
Mhm.
role is important to the development of the continent, to the development
Yes.
of an organization, to the development
Yes.
of a community, right? Every
Yes.
role is important. It doesn't mean if you're the CEO or a janitor. Every role is important,
Important.
and all roles are needed.
All roles are needed. And I'll come back. I think I'm using a lot of proverbs. In Satya, which is all these fingers, in Satya, Enyepe are not the
Mm,
same.
mm,
They are not the same in the sense that they are not all straight, they are different length. So that when you are grabbing, you can grip or grab properly. And
mhm,
each one plays a role.
mhm, mhm,
So when the elders say insetia in your pair, which means that the thumb has its role, this finger, the middle finger, and all the other fingers have their roles to play with this hand.
mhm, mhm.
So that is an account proverb for you as well. So in leadership, you need your janitor as much as you need your CEO.
That's right.
The CEO is not going to do the janitor's job. The manager is not going to do the janitor's job. The janitor is doing his or her job to keep the environment clean. The CEO is to lead the leadership or the vision of the company, and the managers are to manage X, Y, and Z to make sure everybody is following the vision of the company. Am I
That
right?
absolutely, and it's a living, breathing organism. It's not static. It's always flowing. There's always
Mm.
harmony. Yeah, it's always it's meaning if it's living and breathing, it's hopefully it's always growing. It's expanding. It's adapting to whatever the environment is.
We don't often think about it that way. We don't often think about it that way. And, it's sometimes, and this is from an African perspective, that sometimes you meet Africans, or let me say Ghanaians, working in a government organization, and they'll say, "This is not my father's company." So they can do whatever that they want. They really don't care about it. And that is a huge thing for me personally because I don't care. I don't care. It's not my father's company. It's not my father's company. Everybody says it's not my father's company, which means the company, that's what,
Hmm.
falls, is destroyed.
Absolutely.
Then you are out of a job. But if you say that this, if this were my company, this is how I am going to treat it, and I expect my next person to treat it X, Y, and Z. When we all come on board to make sure that, for instance, Ghana becomes a good country, that means I'm working on me. Whatever skills, knowledge, and acquisition I have, I am bringing it to the table. I am doing my part, and then the next person is doing their part. Now, our brothers and sisters from the diaspora are also in to do their part. And together, when we sit at the table, we can make decisions that is to the greater glory of the country and the continent and the diaspora.
Mm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Sorry, I
Absolutely.
think I went off.
No, absolutely. 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 Agree 100%.
Oh my goodness. So, let's get back to you, your writing and your thought leadership. And since we're winding down on this conversation, so as we've heard, you're an accomplished author. And so, how has this writing on leadership helped you clarify your own philosophies or strategies in
Mm.
coaching others?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Um, I constantly
Hmm.
review that 7 word mission that I gave you of helping others improve their quality of life.
Yeah.
I'm constantly reviewing that to see if it needs to be updated.
Mm.
But since 2003, there's no need to update it because it is just as solid today as it was then,
Was that?
and it's all encompassing. And so it enables me to listen to other philosophies open-mindedly and examine it. Um, and I'm open to new knowledge. I'm open to new experiences. But at the end of the day, it sets the platform or the foundation for who I am and who I how I'm how, who I am and how I move, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I do things, they have to be consistent with that, right? So you asked me earlier, why did I say yes to being a guest on your show, right? Um, one, you it was an honor, and I was humbled that you saw the article, you saw the value of the work, and you valued it enough to ask me to be a guest on your show.
Mm-hmm. I
So,
think
because
I printed it out, and I don't know where the rest is, but I have underlined here, underlined that thus embracing the lessons from Anansi Tale can significantly influence how modern entities approach challenges and leverage their critical assets. It was a lot that I kept underlying. That Anansi's story stands as a timeless reminder of the importance of humility, balance, and collective over the individual. So I'm not going to. Sorry.
and see, I'm always surprised. Say, for instance, I got the invitation to be on your podcast as a result of an article.
Mm,
I wrote an article around
mm,
co-creation, and I made some posts. And then there was a gentleman from South
mm,
Africa who posted on LinkedIn. He said, "Dr. Jackson, I want you to know that I purchased your book, your workbook. I have a workbook on transformational thinking that talks about transformation, how the steps to move into transformation, right?" And so I would, and he said, he posted, I just purchased your workbook. I said, well, there's a book that goes to that.
mm,
And so I also told him about co-creation leadership. Now, this gentleman is in Johannesburg, South Africa. So, in doing a little research, he contacted the Da Vinci School of Business in Johannesburg. Come to find out, they were aware of my book and one article that I wrote on co-creation leadership that came through the University of Pittsburgh, they were using in the School of Business. I would have never known had he not read my article on LinkedIn. We had an inbox conversation, And then I give him my email, and he emails me the article that the Da Vinci School of Business is using. And then he said, "You are transforming the minds of the leaders in South Africa based on the co-creation leadership book and article." I just found this out last week. I had no idea. I didn't know. All I knew is he posted he had purchased the book, then he decided to purchase the other books. So now, fast forward, another article. I write the article. A gentleman shares it. So I see another share, and I'm reading this, and it says it gives the name, of the person who shared it. And I was like, man, I know that person. And so I went into the inbox on LinkedIn and I said, hey, I remember you. We worked at the same organization
Mhm.
together. So he came back to me with the response that kind of blew me away. And that response was interesting because when I told him that I remembered him when we worked together, we were in leadership positions together. He says, Terry, I remember you in those days fondly. I often think of one interaction in particular when we had lunch together at Marriott in Windsor, Connecticut, after a week-long sales training session. And I was thinking, this man has a lot more to offer. So glad to see you bringing it to the world through your coaching and thought leadership. I've enjoyed following your posts and love the podcast and the dynamic between you and Dr. Brown. And thanks for filling our hearts and minds with your thoughtful contributions. And so these are things that I'm not aware of until someone like you or someone like him says, "Hey,
Mhm.
there's value in this
Yes.
article. Let's have a conversation about
Yes.
it." It's impacting people, and hopefully this podcast here, when listen to all of your listeners get a chance to see it, view it, and hear it. It'll have similar impact. But it's always I always say wow when I hear
Mhm.
things like
Oh, thank you so much. So that leads me directly into our how do you call it? Our last question. So lastly, as my people say, last, for
that.
our listeners and for our viewers, whether you're listening at this in this conversation on a podcast on Spotify or wherever you're listening to your podcast, or when you visually looking at us on YouTube. Last, for those who are eager to begin their own journey of personal or professional growth, what is one or maybe two actionable steps they can take today? Today.
that that is great. And if they can take this today and walk away with it and practice
Mhm.
it on a day-to-day basis, and that's just one thing. Question everything.
Mm.
Question everything. And once you question it, then you ask the question, what if? What if this? What if that? It's going to allow the creation of several scenarios, several alternative solutions, several thoughts that you can begin to play with all of those thoughts to find out which thought is best. If you really want to get to the truth of everything, you want to question it. You don't want to just accept it as what they say it is. Question it, and then follow it up with research. As you said, they got the Android, Google. It'll take you to either some answers, or it'll take you to the library
Yes.
to some books
Yes.
that you can begin to do your own research. So as you talked about earlier, sometimes there's people within your culture who lose themselves and become more westernized. When they do their research, they're going to understand that all answers come back to continent Africa. So as much as they want to be Western, people in the West want to be
African.
Africa, because they know that is the home of the original man. They understand that and they know that. And everything they do is to try to get back there. Right. So don't be uh don't admire the West so much that you forget who you are.
Mm.
You're as I like to say when I give presentations, you're a direct descendant of the creator.
Yes. 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 And sometimes the accounts will say, Obi nkyerɛ akwadaa nyame. Nobody shows a child who or what God is. And that is to say, when you deliver a child sunny side up, they come facing the heavens. So obi inchere akwada inyame, which means also that there's a God in all of us, and we need to
That's
acknowledge
right.
that and respect it. And God is not outside; God is within us. But
That's
we've
right.
been
That's right.
taught that God is outside, which is
That's right.
Christianity and Islam and everything else.
That's right.
So we, because of all those things, we a lot of disagreement and a lot of misfortune, most especially with the churches, that we have corrupted most of our systems, letting people think that God outside is going to solve our problems. And as Dr. B this always say, if we sow our seeds into somebody's for a garden, it is going to come, we will reap it. No, sow the seed in your own garden, do your own self
Absolutely.
development, and help the country or countries you come from to develop as well in whatever way or means that you can.
Absolutely.
Dr. Jackson, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. Your insights into both the personal and the professional development are incredibly valuable. And I know our listeners will be leaving with a wealth of knowledge. So thank you for sharing your time and expertise. And I know we have so much to talk about, but one of these
Yes.
days, we are just going to go straight on Nancy and leadership.
Yes, 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 yes. So it was a pleasure being on your show. It was an honor. I look forward to it. I look forward to uh, further communication with you, possibly doing some work together and teaching. So you just let me know, but we'll I'm sure we'll discuss
Dr. Jackson, there's no possibly. We are going to do it.
that.
The God
Awesome.
in us brought us together. So
That's right.
we are going to do it. Don't mind me and my shenanigans, but I believe that there is a reason and there's a purpose why we are connecting and speaking this beautiful language of mind, body, and soul. Ah,
Yes,
amen.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Hello, viewers. You've been watching the Nana Yaa Yeboaa Show, a beautiful conversation with Dr. Terry Jackson here on the show. Please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to